A morgue technician begins his night shift like any other, until he discovers a new corpse with no record, no name, and no death. As each night passes, another body appears, and the count rises without explanation. What begins as eerie coincidence spirals into a terrifying realization. The dead are not resting, and the final name on the list might be his own. Dive into the terrifying story of the body counter, a psychological horror where the silence of the morgue hides something far darker. The buzzing fluorescent light flickered overhead, casting a stuttering white glow across the tiled floor of the hospital morgue. Elias Granger stood motionless in his stained lab coat, eyes fixed on the cold metal table at the center of the room. His breath curled in the air like smoke. The refrigeration units hummed behind him, their dull mechanical rhythm pulsing like a heartbeat. Steady, indifferent. Outside, the night hung heavy over the city. Wind hissing through the alleyways like a whisper that never ended. Rain ticked against the high window, soft but unrelenting. Somewhere, a dog barked once, then fell silent. Elias checked the ledger again, fingers tracing the last entry. No new arrivals. He was sure of it. Dr. Mayers hadn't signed off on any recent deaths, and the ER had been unusually quiet. Just a few minor injuries, no codes, no DOAs. Yet the body was here. It hadn't been here during the last round. He remembered sweeping the entire morgue just before midnight. Habitually precise, always meticulous. The gurney had been empty then, the sheets folded, the straps hanging loose. Now it was occupied. The corpse lay still beneath the white shroud, the faint outline of a human form pressing against the fabric. Elias took a breath and approached. His rubber sole squeaked softly on the floor, every step magnified by the oppressive quiet. He pulled the sheet back. A woman, pale, mid-30s maybe. Her skin had the waxen sheen of death, but no signs of trauma. Her lips were parted slightly, frozen in a breath that would never finish. Hair damp, clinging to her forehead. A hospital bracelet circled her wrist, but it was blank. No name, no ID number. Elias frowned. He turned to the logbook again, flipping through the pages. Nothing. He walked to the terminal and checked the digital system. Still nothing. The timestamp on the security footage would clear things up. He clipped through the camera feeds and stopped. There was a gap. The feed looped smoothly through the last hours, up until 2:13 a.m. Then it jumped to 2:24. 11 minutes missing. He leaned closer, staring at the frozen frame. The camera showed the entrance to the morgue hallway. It had been empty, but the next frame, the one at 2:24, showed the gurney already inside the room, the sheet drawn. Elias felt a chill crawl up his spine. He glanced at the body again. A soft sound reached his ears. It was faint, barely audible, a kind of tapping, wet, deliberate, drip, drip, drip. He looked down. A thin line of water trailed from beneath the gurney, curving like a black vein across the floor. He knelt and touched it. Cold, almost icy. He sniffed it. Just water. But where had it come from? The morgue was dry, always had been. He followed the trail to the corner of the room, where it disappeared beneath one of the unused cold storage drawers. The air felt heavier there, denser, like something was waiting just beyond the metal. He didn't open the drawer. Instead, he turned back to the woman. Her eyes were open. Elias froze. He was certain they had been closed before. Wide, glassy, unblinking, they stared directly at him. Her pupils dilated, almost unnaturally black. Her lips curled slightly at the corners, almost a smile. Almost. A high-pitched whine screeched through the room as one of the overhead lights flickered violently. Then, with a snap, it went dark. Only one remained now, casting an uneven pool of light. Elias backed away slowly. He wasn't a superstitious man. The dead stayed dead. That was the foundation of his world. The silence of the morgue, the stillness of the deceased. He found comfort in that stillness, control. But this was not stillness. The woman blinked, just once, and Elias ran. He burst into the hallway, heart hammering, footsteps echoing like gunshots. The corridor was long, lined with locked doors and the steady hum of ventilation. He pressed himself against the wall, breathing hard. Silence returned. He waited, listening. No footsteps followed. No doors creaked open. The world had gone still again, but the dread clung to him, an invisible film across his skin. He called security. By the time they arrived, the body was gone. No trail, no water. No trace of her presence except the impression left on the gurney's cushion, and the faint scent of antiseptic mingled with something far older, metallic, ancient. The cameras still showed nothing. When Elias reported the event, the staff chalked it up to stress. Long shifts, overwork, maybe a hallucination brought on by exhaustion. But that night, as he sat alone in the break room, Elias heard the sound again. Drip, drip, drip. He turned toward the window. There was no rain now, only silence, and a reflection in the glass that didn't match his own. The morning light filtered into the morgue like a reluctant guest, barely warming the white walls or dispelling the lingering cold from the night before. Elias sat at his desk with a steaming cup of coffee cradled in both hands, eyes locked on the surveillance monitor that replayed the blank space of time over and over. 11 minutes. Gone. The hospital's IT team had examined the footage earlier that morning and offered nothing helpful. Technical glitch, they'd said. Maybe a data corruption from the backup server. Elias didn't argue. He nodded, muttered thanks, and let them leave. But he knew better. He had seen her. And now she was gone. The gurney still bore the impression of her weight, shallow indentations on the mattress pad, and the faintest crease in the sheet where her hands had rested across her chest. But nothing else remained. No name, no record, no witness. The death log for the previous night was still empty. No ER calls, no ambulances, no toe-tagged transfers from any department. The hospital had experienced 0 fatalities. That wasn't unusual. Some nights passed quietly. But this time, it felt wrong. The morgue was quiet now, too quiet. The usual mechanical buzz, the whirring of fans, the soft tick of the ancient wall clock, all were present, but somehow muted. as if the very air was holding its breath. At 10:07 a.m., the phone rang. Elias jumped, sloshing coffee across his wrist. He cursed softly, wiped the burn on his coat sleeve, and picked up the receiver. Morgue, Granger speaking. "Hey, Elias, this is Kelly from reception." Her voice was brisk, chipper, unaware of the strange weight in his chest. "Just checking in. Did they bring someone down to you last night? A woman, late 30s, no ID?" Elias stiffened. He turned slowly to the now empty gurney. "Yes," he said, throat dry. "Who was she?" "That's the thing," Kelly replied. "We got a call this morning from a man asking about his wife. Said she had a mental episode. Wandered into the ER but never checked in. Her name's Meredith Wiles. He swore she was here last night, but nothing on our end." "Did she die here?" Elias asked quietly. "Nope, never admitted. Not even a record of her passing the front desk." Kelly hesitated. "Strange thing, though. He described the exact clothes you mentioned in your internal note. Gray nightgown. Bare feet, a hospital bracelet with no info." Elias felt his fingers tighten around the receiver. "Thanks, Kelly." He hung up before she could say anything more. So the name echoed in his head. Meredith Wiles. It didn't match any patient from the last 24 hours. But the coincidence gnawed at him. He walked back toward the cold storage drawer where he'd seen the trail of water, crouched and opened it. Empty, but the inside was colder than usual, not just refrigerator cold, bone-deep cold. A breath of winter air curling out from the darkness, biting his skin even through his coat. The overhead lights dimmed for a split second. Then came the sound again. Drip, drip, drip. He turned. A new trail of water stretched from the hallway into the morgue, curving in an unnatural path across the floor. This one wasn't melting ice or a cleaning mishap. It was fresh. Too fresh. Elias followed it. Down the corridor. Past the nurse's station. Through the fire doors. Into the abandoned wing of the hospital. The one scheduled for renovation, but long since forgotten. Wallpaper peeled like old skin. Ceiling tiles sagged under water damage. Light bulbs flickered overhead, some dead entirely. The trail ended in front of room 309. The door stood slightly ajar. Elias hesitated, then pushed it open. Inside was an old patient room. The bed was stripped. Dust coated every surface. But someone had been there. Footprints tracked through the gray film on the floor. The bathroom door was shut. He approached, slowly. The handle was cold, freezing. He reached out, turned it, and opened the door. Empty. But the mirror above the sink was fogged, as if someone had just exhaled against it. Slowly, a shape began to form in the condensation. A handprint, small, feminine. Then another. Then a word smeared slowly across the glass from the inside. Still here. Elias stumbled back, heart pounding. His breath caught in his throat, and then he heard it. A voice, distant but close, whispering his name. Elias. Soft, hollow. Echoing through the room, like wind whistling through the broken teeth of the building. He turned and fled. The hallway groaned beneath his feet. The lights overhead pulsing in and out like failing stars. He didn't stop until he burst back into the main corridor, collapsing against the wall, gasping. Dr. Mayers stood there, clipboard in hand, brows furrowed. "Elias, are you all right?" Elias looked up, chest heaving. Did we have a woman named Meredith Wiles admitted last night?" Mayers flipped through the clipboard. No Merediths at all this week. "She was here," Elias said, voice tight. "I saw her. She was dead. But then she was gone." Mayers didn't laugh. To his credit, he didn't scoff either. He simply watched Elias for a long moment. "You've been working a lot of night shifts," Mayers said finally. "Why don't you take a few days off, get some sleep, let your mind breathe a little?" Elias wanted to argue. He wanted to scream that something unnatural had entered the hospital, something that didn't belong in the world of the living, but he didn't. Because when he looked back down the hallway, the trail of water was gone. That night, Elias sat in his apartment, curtains drawn tight. The walls seemed thinner than usual. Every creak in the floorboards above, every gust of wind outside the window made him jump. At 3:12 a.m., the power flickered. His phone buzzed once. A new message, unknown number. It read only 3 words, "I found you." And from the hallway outside his door came the soft sound of dripping water. Elias didn't sleep. Not after the message, not after the dripping, not after the unmistakable sound of bare feet shifting outside his door, slow and wet, like something that had just crawled out of a river and had forgotten how to walk. He sat in the corner of his living room, knees to his chest, a kitchen knife clenched tight in one shaking hand. The screen of his phone glowed beside him. No new messages, no missed calls. Just those 3 words still frozen at the top of the screen. "I found you." He didn't open the door. The sound stopped around 4:10 a.m., and dawn crept in soon after. Not with warmth, but with a kind of sickly gray pallor that made the apartment feel even colder. Elias showered with the curtain open, eyes locked on the mirror the entire time. He arrived at the hospital before the morning shift began. The morgue smelled faintly of bleach and something more subtle. Something wrong. Like spoiled milk mixed with old flowers left too long in a vase. He scanned the room. The gurney was back in place. The ledgers were untouched. Everything seemed normal. But the silence had changed. It wasn't peace. It was waiting. He moved toward the lockers in the back, opened his, and removed his coat. As he turned, he caught his reflection in the mirror beside the cabinet. His eyes were sunken, his face pale. But it wasn't just exhaustion that made his stomach knot. Behind him, in the glass, was a second reflection. A woman, gray skin, hair wet and matted, eyes wide and smiling. He spun around. No one there, only the empty lockers and the long line of sealed drawers, still and silent. He stared into the mirror again, just himself now. He breathed out, slow and shaking, and reached for the clipboard to start his rounds. He moved through the inventory methodically. Drawer 17B, drawer 20C, drawer 22D, all accounted for, all sealed, all cold, until he reached drawer 19A. It was slightly ajar. That was impossible. Elias stared at it, heart thudding against his ribs. The lock light was red, indicating secure, but the edge was open by maybe half an inch. He reached forward, and a sudden gust of icy air hissed from the gap, like a whisper dragged through broken teeth. He gripped the handle and opened it fully. Inside was a body, a new body, male, middle-aged. No tag, no report, no documentation. Yet here it was, naked, stiff and arranged neatly on the sliding tray. He stumbled back, breath catching in his throat. No deaths had been logged overnight. He checked the digital system again. Nothing. Not a single entry since yesterday morning. He contacted Kelly at reception. "No arrivals, Elias," she said, concern creeping into her tone. "You okay?" "No one brought anything down?" he asked. "Security footage?" "Security didn't log any movement in or out of your wing between 10 p.m. and now. You sure you're not seeing things?" He didn't answer. He couldn't, because just then, from behind him, came the sound of breathing. Soft, raspy, warm. He turned. The body on the tray had shifted. The head was now tilted toward him, mouth slightly open, not in a scream, in a smile. The lights above buzzed and flickered. The temperature in the room dropped in an instant. His breath misted in front of him, trembling with each exhale. A sound echoed in the hallway. A knock. 3 knocks, slow and measured. Elias backed toward the door, unable to take his eyes off the corpse. His hand found the knob, just as the drawer slammed shut behind him with a metallic crash that echoed like a gunshot. He flinched, heart rattling in his chest, and stepped into the hall. It was empty. He turned toward the security office. The head of hospital security, a man named Rourke, listened to Elias with a frown. "You're saying the drawer opened by itself, and there was a body no one brought in?" "Yes," Elias said, "and it wasn't there yesterday. No one's filed any incident reports, no footage, no missing persons matching that guy's description. You sure it's not a misfile?" "Rourke," Elias said, voice tight, "I've worked this place for 9 years. I know every face that comes through that freezer. That man wasn't here." Rourke nodded slowly, then stood. "Let's go take a look." They returned together. Drawer 19A was sealed. Rourke opened it. Empty. No body. No warmth. No trace of the man Elias had seen. Rourke looked at him sideways. "Maybe you should see someone, just to be sure." "I'm not imagining this," Elias said, voice low. Rourke didn't press him further, but Elias saw the doubt in his eyes, the same doubt Mayers had worn the day before. They thought he was unraveling. Maybe he was. He returned to his station and sat down, staring at the empty gurney again. Then he noticed something. A piece of paper. It hadn't been there before. It sat neatly on the clipboard, folded once. No name, no date. He opened it. A single sentence, written in blocky, wet ink. "I was cold until you saw me." The letters began to smear beneath his fingers, as if the ink were still fresh, still bleeding. That night, he didn't go home. He stayed. And at exactly 3 a.m., the morgue lights died. The cold grew heavier. And somewhere in the dark, someone exhaled. The generator kicked in with a growl, and a dull red light pulsed through the emergency strips lining the morgue ceiling. Elias stood frozen beside the gurney, sweat trailing down his spine despite the creeping cold. The main power had gone out precisely at 3 o'clock in the morning, just as it had the night before, and the silence that followed felt intentional, expectant. He gripped the flashlight tighter. Its narrow beam sliced through the gloom. Dancing across stainless steel drawers, equipment carts, and tiled walls, now shadow-streaked and breathing with flickers of red. He moved slowly toward the back wall, where the cold storage units lined up like silent sentinels. His footsteps were muffled by the hum of the generator and the occasional metallic creak that sounded too close, too alive. Drawer 19A, still locked, still sealed, but the air around it felt wrong again. Not cold, hollow. He turned away, directing the beam toward the morgue entrance. That's when he saw it. The door was open. It hung ajar by 3 inches. Just enough for darkness to spill in from the hallway, like a stain. It should have been locked. He locked it himself every night. Part of his final checklist, always confirmed with a satisfying click of the heavy latch. The only key was in his coat pocket. He hadn't used it tonight. Elias approached slowly, each step echoing louder than it should. He reached the door and pushed it gently with 2 fingers. It creaked open with agonizing slowness. The hallway was empty. Or it seemed that way. The flashlight flickered as he stepped into the corridor. The red backup lights turned the white walls to a sickly maroon, and his shadow stretched long behind him, clawed and distorted. He passed the elevator, still dark. The overhead indicator blinked nonsense symbols, as though confused by its own function. The door had deep scratches across its surface, old but recently deepened, gouges that hadn't been there the day before. He heard it again. Drip, drip, drip. Not from a sink, not from a pipe, from flesh. Wet, deliberate, rhythmically uneven. He followed the sound. It led him toward the old operating theater, abandoned for years. The room had been stripped of instruments and repurposed as temporary storage for broken gurneys and outdated machinery. No one ever went inside. The morgue staff called it the dead wing. He reached the door. Frost rimmed the handle. The flashlight trembled in his grip as he turned it. The room beyond was dark and full. Rows of unused hospital beds lined the space. Sheets draped over forgotten equipment fluttered in some non-existent breeze. Dust motes danced in the air like falling ash, and in the center of the room, someone stood. A woman. Her hospital gown clung to her body like wet paper. Her skin was slick and gray. Her head was tilted slightly, eyes fixed directly on Elias. And her lips moved. No voice, only the sound. Drip. Elias stepped back, heart hammering. She took 1 step forward. He dropped the flashlight. Darkness swallowed everything. The red lights failed. The hum of the generator cut to silence. The morgue behind him might as well have been a world away. All that remained was the sound of bare feet sliding across the tile. Closer, closer. He ran, blind. He crashed into a bed frame, staggered sideways, caught himself on a cold metal tray that toppled to the ground with a deafening clang. He didn't stop. He didn't look back. He reached the hallway and flung himself through the morgue door, slamming it shut behind him. He turned the lock. It clicked, then unlocked itself. The handle turned, slowly. No hand visible. Elias backed away, breath ragged. The door didn't open. It simply stopped turning, as if whoever was behind it was no longer interested or had already found another way in. He sank to the floor, head spinning. From the corner of the room, a light blinked to life. It was the terminal screen. It displayed a message in blocky green text, despite the lack of full power. One arrival. Below it, a name appeared. Meredith Wiles. The screen flickered once and changed again. 2 arrivals. A new name, Elias Granger. He stared, and somewhere inside the morgue, from behind a sealed drawer, came the soft sound of breathing. Warm, damp, wrong. He stood slowly, backing away from the terminal, eyes darting across the room. No one there. No movement. But then the refrigeration unit hummed to life again, and drawer 17B slid open on its own. Inside was a body, covered in a white sheet, still. But Elias could see the slow rise and fall of its chest, like a sleeping thing trying to remember how to wake. He ran. He didn't stop until he reached the parking lot. Rain pelted his face. Wind tore at his coat. But he didn't care. Behind him, high up in the hospital's west wing, one window glowed faintly. A silhouette stood there, watching, waiting, and smiling. The rain hadn't let up. It hammered Elias's windshield with a furious rhythm, drowning the world in water and shadow. He sat motionless in his car, just outside the hospital, fingers white-knuckled on the steering wheel, eyes locked on the darkened building through the sheets of cascading rain. He had left the morgue hours ago, fled like a coward, yet here he was again, drawn back, pulled by something colder than fear. He couldn't explain it, not even to himself. The hospital loomed like a tombstone, all its windows dark except one. That same window on the west wing, glowing faintly, still watching. He stepped out into the storm. Each raindrop struck like a needle. The wind sliced at his coat. But Elias barely felt it. His mind was somewhere else, stuck in the humming silence of the morgue, in the hiss of breath from drawers that should never open, the whisper of his name in places no voice should echo. He entered through the side staff entrance, using his keycard. The scanner took longer than usual to beep. For a second, he thought it wouldn't let him in at all. The inside of the hospital was still, unnaturally so. The late-night shift usually brought soft chatter from the nurses' station, the squeak of carts, the low beeping of distant machines. But tonight, there was nothing. No footsteps, no voices, just the groan of the old pipes, the occasional crackle of the speakers in the ceiling, and the quiet whisper of the wind snaking through the walls. As Elias descended toward the morgue, the lights above him flickered in sequence, one by one, as if something was following behind him or guiding him forward. He reached the lower level. The morgue door stood open. It never did that. He entered slowly, footsteps echoing too loud against the tile. The overhead lights were dim. The emergency ones hadn't even turned on. Something was wrong with the generator. Or maybe it knew he was here. Elias paused by the gurney. It was no longer in the center of the room. It sat against the far wall now, half tilted, its wheels damp with a thin line of black water. A smear of something dark stained the floor beneath it. Not blood, but something thicker. Something that smelled like rot and iron and mold. He moved to the computer terminal. The screen was already on. The green text glared at him. Current count, 4. He stared. 4? His breath hitched. He pulled the logbook from the desk and flipped through it. No entries, no deaths. He scanned the drawers, moving from one to the next, checking the seals, the temperature locks. 17B, sealed. 19A, sealed. 20C, he froze. Drawer 20C was slightly ajar. The lock light flashed yellow. He reached for it, but then stopped. A voice echoed through the room. Not loud, not angry, just counting. 2, 3, 4. It came from behind the wall of drawers. The whisper was damp, like someone speaking through a mouthful of river water. Each word slithered past his ears and coiled in his spine. He backed away slowly, the hair on his arms rising. 5. It was getting closer. Not louder, but nearer. 6. Elias turned and bolted. He didn't take the hallway this time. He veered right into the old refrigeration chamber. The room no longer in use, abandoned after a system failure years ago. The door creaked as he pushed inside. The smell hit him instantly. Freezer burn and mildew. The walls were lined with empty shelving units, old equipment left to rust, and a shattered clock frozen at 3 o'clock. The whisper followed him. 7. The temperature dropped again. His breath clouded the air. Frost kissed the metal shelves. The whisper grew distant, then came back in another corner, circling. Searching, he ducked behind a shelf. The whisper passed him. So close, he could hear the moisture in its throat, the wet slur of its tongue on every syllable. It was not a human voice anymore. It had something else inside it. 8. A metallic clang echoed from the corridor outside. Elias took his chance. He slipped from the freezer, back into the main morgue, just in time to see a shadow disappear into the West Wing hallway. It moved in stutters, like a broken film reel skipping frames. He didn't follow. Instead, he turned back to the desk. The terminal screen had changed. Current count, 5. He scrolled down. Name, Elias Branger. Status, pending. The screen glitched. Lines of corrupted code danced across the display, then stilled. A new message appeared. Slow, deliberate. Do not look away when they count. He shut the monitor off and stepped back. Silence. Then, a new sound. Tick, tick, tick. Not a clock. Fingernails on glass. He turned. The observation window into the adjacent room was fogged. But a shape stood behind it. A tall figure, unmoving. And on the glass, words were being scratched in. I see you. I hear you. I know your number. Then the light snapped off. Elias didn't scream. He just stood there, eyes adjusting to the dark, as the whisper began again. Closer this time. 6, 7, 8. A warm breath touched the back of his neck, and the count continued. The lights never came back on, not fully. The hospital's emergency systems hiccuped, groaned, then failed completely sometime after 3:18 a.m. Every bulb went black, every panel flatlined. The backup generator, ancient and unreliable, sputtered out its last breath with a choking grind that echoed through the hollow walls like a death rattle. Elias stood alone in the dark. The breath behind his neck was gone, but its weight remained. The whispering count had stopped mid-syllable. It had not finished. That, more than anything, disturbed him. He didn't know what number came next. Silence swallowed the morgue, not the peaceful kind. The kind that pressed against your ears and made your thoughts feel too loud. The kind that made you aware of your own heartbeat, your own warmth, your own life, and how little of it might be left. Elias reached blindly for his phone, fumbled with it, and turned on the flashlight. A narrow beam cut through the dark, trembling with every twitch of his hand. The light found the gurney first, now positioned directly in the center of the room again. The wheels left wet tracks in a perfect circle on the tile, like it had been spinning for hours. The sheet covering it had been pulled taut. Elias approached slowly, shoes squelching slightly with every step. Something sticky clung to the floor beneath him. A slick film of water, or something thicker. He reached the gurney and peeled back the sheet. No body, just a message, scratched into the surface of the mattress like it had been carved with broken nails. You left the door open. A sudden sound split the silence. Bang! Something slammed shut. Elias turned sharply, light darting toward the wall of drawers. One had closed. But which one? He crept forward, eyes darting between the sealed compartments. All lights were out now. No indicators, no numbers. The cold hung in the air like a fog, breathing around him. The silence was broken again, not by noise, but by absence. The whispering, it had resumed. Not from behind him, not from the drawers, but from inside the walls. A chorus of hushed voices, counting in tandem, voices layered on top of each other. Low, wet, and overlapping in dreadful unison. 3, 4, 5, 6. The walls trembled softly, just enough to stir the dangling chains of the ceiling-mounted hooks. They clinked together like chimes at a funeral procession. He turned in a slow circle, breathing shallow, heart thudding too loud. The counting continued. 7, 8. Then it stopped. Elias's light flickered. For a fraction of a second, he saw all the drawers open, every one. Bodies stood inside them, their eyes open, their mouths smiling. Then the light stabilized and they were gone. The drawers were sealed once more. Elias stumbled back, hand over his mouth, bile rising in his throat. His knees gave out and he landed hard on the floor. The tile felt like ice beneath his palms. He had to get out, now. He moved toward the exit, but stopped when his flashlight caught something new. A figure, standing just outside the morgue door. Tall, still, watching. It didn't move. It didn't breathe, but it was there. And then it began to knock. 1, 2, 3. Elias dropped the flashlight. The light tumbled, spinning across the floor, sending wild shadows crawling up the walls. He backed away, not blinking, not daring to turn. The knocking grew louder, faster. 4, 5, 6. The figure pressed one pale hand to the small window in the door. Long fingers, wet skin, a distorted smile blooming in the distorted glass. The door creaked. Not from a push, from a pull. It was opening itself. Elias ran. He sprinted out through the side door to the maintenance hall, fumbling blindly in the dark. He slammed his shoulder into a pipe, nearly lost his footing, but kept running. He had to reach the stairs, get above ground, into the light. But there was no light anymore. The whole hospital had gone dark. As he turned the final corner, something stopped him. Not a person, a sound in the dark ahead. Someone was breathing, not panicked, not startled, slow, rhythmic, patient, like something that had been waiting for him. The flashlight, still in his hand, cast a weak cone forward. It revealed nothing, but the breath continued. Then came the voice, a whisper, inches from his ear. 9. Elias turned, heart stopping. No one was there. He ran up the stairwell, skipping steps, scraping his hands raw on the concrete walls. The breathing followed him. Not louder, just closer. Always closer. He burst onto the first floor, deserted, lights off, monitors dead. The halls were flooded in moonlight, pale and colorless. Then he saw it. A figure at the end of the corridor, facing the wall, motionless. Elias didn't call out. He didn't move. He just watched. The figure began to count. 10. It turned its head slowly, eyes wide, skin gray, lips moving silently. Then came the sound again. Knock, knock, knock. From behind him this time. He turned back. No one there, but he felt it. A hand brushing against his back. The final whisper, 11. Elias collapsed to his knees, hands over his ears, and still the counting rose. From every direction, from every shadow, from inside him. The lights didn't return until dawn, but by then, Elias was no longer in the morgue. He was back in his apartment, sitting upright in bed, fully dressed, shoes soaked, the floor wet, the door wide open, and carved into the wall above his head, a single word, etched deep and jagged, 12. Elias stared at the word etched above his bed, 12. Each letter dug deep into the drywall, grooves jagged and raw, as if clawed by something not made to write. His breath steamed in the morning light, though the room was far from cold. The walls seemed to vibrate with silence, that heavy, holding kind, like the seconds before a scream. He didn't remember leaving the hospital. He didn't remember coming home, but the muddy footprints on his floor matched the ones still wet on his shoes. The apartment reeked of old water and antiseptic. Something had followed him, or maybe something had brought him back. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at his trembling hands. He was not injured. He was not bleeding, but he felt torn apart. Not on the outside, inside. His phone lit up, A new notification, automated report, new admission to morgue. 6:44 a.m., unidentified female, no entry in patient logs. Elias's chest locked. No name, no death certificate, no witness, no record. Just like Meredith, just like the others. The count was rising again. He rushed to the hospital. The city felt quieter than usual, the streets thinned by an early fog that clung low to the ground, wrapping itself around tires and ankles and lampposts like a living thing. The sky was pale, the kind of gray that presses down on you, crushing everything underneath it. As if it, too, was waiting for something to happen. He entered through the loading dock. No need for pleasantries, no time for explanations. The hallway to the morgue was wet. A thin trail of footprints led from the elevator to the double doors. Bare feet, narrow, staggered, like someone had walked just ahead of him or had never left. The doors were ajar. He pushed them open. The morgue was still, too still. He glanced around. The fluorescent lights flickered, casting warped shadows across the gurneys. The air was dense with that unmistakable mix of chemical cleaner, steel, and something worse. Something that had no name but always made his stomach twist. Like the smell of old breath trapped in a coffin. He moved toward the refrigeration wall. Drawer 9B was marked on the admission sheet. He reached for the handle, then froze. The lock indicator was green, unsealed. He pulled. Inside lay a woman, face pale, skin mottled with the first signs of death, but still soft. Her hands were folded neatly over her chest. Her long black hair clung to her cheeks, damp with condensation. Her eyes were closed, but something about the way her lips curled sent a shiver into Elias's spine. He looked at her bracelet, blank. He checked the logs. No Meredith, no identification, but something odd. Under admission by, there was a single name, Elias Granger. His throat went dry. He had not signed this. He hadn't been here since the blackout. Someone, or something, had entered his name into the system. He reached for his phone and began to take a photo of the screen. The lights flickered. The drawer behind him creaked. He turned. Drawer 10A was open by a sliver. He approached slowly, heart pounding against his ribs like a warning drum. Inside was nothing. No body, just a folded piece of paper. He pulled it out with trembling fingers and unfolded it. You can't hide from what you bring in. A noise, a soft drag across tile. He turned back to the gurney, and the woman was sitting up. Her eyes were open, wide, bloodshot, and staring directly at him. Elias stumbled back, hitting the counter, sending a tray of instruments crashing to the floor. He looked up. She was gone. The drawer was empty. The trail of wet footprints now led deeper into the hospital. He followed, not by choice, by need. Down the corridor, past the nurse's station. No one else was around. The lights above buzzed, some flickering erratically, casting seizure-like shadows that twisted his vision. He followed the trail to a place he had never been. Sub-basement access. No one used it. The door was always locked. But now, it was open. Inside, the stairs wound down in darkness. His flashlight flickered as he descended. Each step groaned beneath him, old concrete sighing under the weight of things better left forgotten. The air grew colder. He could see his breath. Then came the sound again. Whispered, not numbers this time. Names, faint, repeating. Meredith, Elias, Granger. Meredith, Elias. He turned a corner. At the bottom of the stairwell stood a door. It was rusted, sealed with chains that had long since been snapped. Scratched into the surface dozens of times was a single phrase. She wasn't on the list. He reached for the handle. The metal was warm, breathing. He opened it. Inside was not a room. It was a corridor of drawers, walls made of morgue compartments that stretched endlessly into blackness. And from each one, a whisper, a smile, a name. Some of the compartments were open. Some still moved. And in the center of it all stood the woman. She looked at him, head tilted, hair clinging to her cheeks. Her mouth moved. No sound. Just emotion. She pointed to the nearest drawer. It bore no label, no number, just one word, etched in the steel like a warning. Granger. He stepped closer. Inside was him. Eyes closed, mouth slack, skin pale, but breathing. And then the whisper began again, slow. 1. Behind him, the door closed. The lights went out, and the count continued. Elias did not scream. He wanted to. The breath hitched in his throat, clawed at his lungs, but something deep inside him, something ancient and cold, held it back. Maybe it was the oppressive silence of that corridor of drawers. Maybe it was the face staring up at him from inside the compartment labeled Granger. His own. His corpse double didn't move, but it was breathing. Not a trick of the air, not an illusion. Its chest rose. It fell, again and again. Elias stepped back. Eyes locked on the thing that should not exist. The whispers in the walls swirled into a chant. His name repeated by dozens of hushed voices, each one slightly off. Too wet, too sharp, too full of teeth. Elias, Elias, Elias! He turned and ran. The corridor seemed endless. Lights flickered overhead, only illuminating fragments of his path. Cold air pressed against his back like a hand. Behind him, drawers slammed shut, others opened. The metallic sounds clanged off the concrete, creating echoes that multiplied until they felt like footsteps chasing him. He stumbled up the stairs, hands scraping the chipped concrete, breath ragged. The whispers followed. The names still hissed behind his ears. He didn't stop until he burst through the door to the main floor of the hospital. The lights here were brighter. Stable. The smell of bleach replaced the rot and dampness, but the peace was false. Too clean, too quiet. He made his way to the reception desk. It was unmanned, not even Kelly. The monitor glowed faintly. A single window on the screen blinked. Morgue record system. 5:39 a.m. Current count, 13. The log listed 13 entries, but only 12 names. The 13th, unknown, active. His hands trembled as he reached for the mouse. He clicked on the entry. No name, no age, no gender, just a blinking cursor where information should be. And then the screen changed on its own. One line of text appeared. "You're still breathing. That's the mistake." The monitor blacked out. Elias stumbled back from the desk. The hallway lights flickered once, casting long shadows that stretched and twisted like they were trying to grab him. He turned and ran, not to the morgue, not this time. He went to the patient wing, room 407. It had been shut down months ago for mold remediation, but something in his gut dragged him there now. Not memory, not instinct, something deeper, something wrong. The hallway leading to 407 was flooded with low fog, as if the cold from below had found its way up here. The fluorescent lights barely reached the walls, the darkness pressing in from both sides, like the building itself was breathing. He pushed open the door. The room was still intact. A single bed sat in the center, sheets pulled up over a body. Elias stepped forward. The sheets were trembling, just slightly. He reached out, fingers brushing the coarse fabric. Something moved beneath. Not a twitch, not a jerk, a slow shifting. Like something turning over inside. He took a breath and pulled the sheet back. Nothing. Just the impression of a body on the mattress. A deep groove, still fresh, still warm. He turned to leave, but the door was no longer behind him. Just a wall, seamless. He reached out, slapped his hand against it, heart pounding. Another sound filled the room, a wet inhalation. He turned. The bed was full again. Same sheet, same body shape, but now the sheet was rising. Something underneath it was getting up. He stepped back. The figure stood, the sheet still draped over it like a shroud. It took one step forward, the outline of its face pressed against the fabric. Lips moving beneath the cotton. No sound. Another step, then the whisper. "You don't belong here, Elias." His knees nearly gave out. The figure reached up, slowly, and peeled back the sheet. It was Meredith, but not as he remembered her. Her eyes were wide and white, no pupils. Her skin was translucent, waterlogged. Her jaw unhinged as she smiled. A second voice whispered from behind him. "But you brought them all. You opened the door." He turned. Behind him stood the woman from drawer 9B. Her hair hung like seaweed. Her hands were raw and red. She smiled too, but her teeth were wrong. Too many, all sharp. Then came the sound. The hospital hummed. Not from machinery, from breathing, from movement. The sheets on every empty bed in the wing began to shift, one by one, each sheet rising, as if something underneath was stretching, waking up, ready to stand. Elias ran. He burst through the wall where the door used to be. It cracked and crumbled like paper under his weight. He didn't look back. Not when the whispers returned, not when the counting resumed. 14, 15. Back to the main floor. Lights shattered above him. Monitors crackled. Elevators screamed open to reveal nothing but dark, dripping pits. The hospital was unraveling, and it was counting every step he took. He reached the security office. The cameras were still recording. He rewound the hallway feed, heart racing. There he was. walking alone. Then again, turning down the hallway. Then again, standing in front of room 407. But something was wrong. Each time he appeared on camera, someone else was with him. A figure standing just behind his shoulder. Sometimes female, sometimes not. Always smiling, always watching. He played the final clip. Elias entering the morgue again, alone. The footage continued. 3 minutes passed. Then, the sheet on the gurney moved, and something sat up. Not Elias, but his reflection. The lights in the office snapped off. The final whisper came from the speaker. 16. And something knocked once on the door behind him. The knock at the security room door did not repeat. It didn't have to. Elias stood in the dark, barely breathing. The red glow from the monitor blinked against his face, casting him in a blood-hued stutter of light. Outside the glass, the hallway stretched silent and empty. But he knew better. He could feel it, the presence, waiting, listening. His hand hovered over the keyboard. He rewound the feed again, slower this time. There it was, the footage from earlier. Him walking into the morgue. He played it frame by frame and saw it. A shadow entering the morgue before him. A flicker, barely there, slender, tall. Moving in unnatural stutters, like a film out of sync. The counter on the screen changed. Current count, 17. Elias blinked. It had been 16 seconds ago. Now, 17. He checked the admissions list. No new names. No forms. Just the same blank entry as before. Unknown, active. But now beneath it, in smaller, freshly added text, one of them is not dead. Elias backed away from the terminal. The silence of the room grew unbearable. The whisper began again. Not outside, inside. It slithered into his mind like cold water dripping through cracks. You brought us, but now there are too many. He turned and ran through the hallway, past the broken elevator, past the nurse's station where every chair was overturned and the phones buzzed with static. Something followed him. Not loud, not visible, but ever present. The sound of dripping water, the press of cold breath, the brush of fingers almost grazing his back. He reached the morgue. The door was wide open. Again. Inside, every drawer was open. Every sheet was pulled halfway back, empty, except one. The gurney in the center. A body lay there, covered, still. He approached slowly, heart pounding, sweat freezing on his back. He reached for the sheet, but the body sat up on its own. It moved like a puppet being lifted by strings, one limb at a time, stiff, precise. The face that looked back at him was his, but not entirely. Its eyes were darker. Its mouth too wide. It smiled. Then the thing spoke. Elias is dead. He shook his head. No, I'm here. I'm breathing. I'm alive. The thing stood, its movements sharpened, more fluid now. Its fingers curled, its neck tilted at a sharp, unnatural angle. You were the first to open the door, it whispered. The lights above flickered. Sparks dropped from the fixtures. The walls hummed with vibrations, like dozens of voices murmuring in unison just behind the tile. You counted us. You called us. And now there are too many. The drawers began to close, one by one, slamming shut, each one with a number scratched into its front. 1, 2, 3, 4, 16. Then the final gurney rolled backward by itself into the empty 17th drawer. The entity, his double, stepped back into the compartment, still smiling. It lay down, pulled the sheet over its face, and whispered, "One must go." The drawer slammed shut. The morgue light snapped off completely. Elias stood alone in the dark. Only the emergency exit light glowed now, dim and pulsing. A green man forever mid-step. He walked toward it slowly, heart thudding in sync with each flicker. As he pushed through the doors to the stairwell, he saw something that stopped him cold. A list, taped to the wall, the morgue log, 17 names, 16 lines crossed out, one left untouched. Elias Granger. Underneath, written in red marker, "Final count pending." Then a sound echoed behind him. Soft, wrong, footsteps. But they didn't echo right. Not one set, two. He turned. At the top of the stairwell stood a shape. His shape, grinning. It raised a finger to its lips. Shh. Then began to walk toward him. Elias turned and fled down the stairs. But with every level he passed, new drawers appeared in the walls. The morgue was spreading, creeping, rewriting the hospital. The whispers followed him, louder now, hungrier. He reached the basement. Not the morgue, a different place, older, wet. He didn't recognize it, and yet it felt like it had always been there. The walls pulsed with moisture. The tiles bled black water from their seams. Something slithered just beneath the surface of the floor. Always following his feet but never surfacing. Ahead a door, unlike any other. It was wood rotting, nailed shut with iron spikes. Chains looped it in place like veins. And carved across the surface, scorched deep into the grain, were the words, "One too many." He touched it. The wood was warm. The chains unraveled like snakes. The door opened. Inside was a single table, a single gurney, and a single sheet, empty, waiting. The whisper returned, right behind him. "You brought too many, Elias. Someone must stay." He turned. His double stood there, but now it looked exactly like him. Clothes, hair, eyes, no flaw, no distortion. The only difference was the silence behind it. No breath, no heartbeat. It reached out and took Elias's hand. Its voice was no longer strange. It was his. "Which one of us walks out?" Then the lights died, and everything went black. Darkness pressed in from all sides, not just the absence of light, but the presence of something thicker, alive, the kind of black that drank sound and swallowed thought. Elias didn't know if his eyes were open or closed. The air was wet, heavy, and full of the scent of old linen, mildew, and rotting breath. He was still standing at the threshold of the door. Or was he inside now? He felt ground beneath his feet, but it pulsed faintly, like he was standing on a giant's chest. Every few seconds, a soft thud echoed upward, deep and slow. A heartbeat, not his. He tried to move, but his legs didn't answer. His arms felt foreign. His skin was cold, wet, like he'd been pulled from a river and only half thawed. Then the whisper, right beside his ear. "You opened the door. Now you must close it." Elias spun toward the voice, but there was only his reflection, standing in front of him, barely visible in the black. A mirror. Where did it come from? It was not glass, not exactly. The surface shimmered like fluid, rippling gently, but the face staring back was crystal clear. His face, but not tired, not broken. Not terrified. The reflection smiled. "I am what you left behind," it said. Elias backed away, but the world shifted with him. No walls, no ceiling, no space. Just endless dark and the mirror. And now, behind the reflection, the drawers. Dozens, hundreds, all stretching into the abyss. Every one of them slightly open. Whispers seeped through the cracks like steam from a boiling pipe. "Count us. You counted wrong. One must stay." Elias's own voice joined them, repeating from somewhere deep within the drawers. "The count is off. The count is off." He fell to his knees. He didn't know when he had begun to cry. The mirror rippled again. His reflection stepped through. Now it was no longer a mirror. It was a doorway. The other Elias stood before him. Perfect, clean, breathing steady. "I've taken your shift," it whispered. "You rest now." Elias tried to speak. His mouth opened. No sound came out. The other leaned down and placed a hand on his chest. Cold flesh, warm breath, until one stops. Then the cold spread, from the hand to his ribs, from his ribs to his spine, from his spine to everything. Elias collapsed, and in that moment he saw it all. The first body that appeared without a name, the drawers that opened on their own, the count that kept climbing. It wasn't about death. It wasn't about ghosts. It was about balance. Every soul that crossed without record had to be met with one that stayed behind. One soul for another, one presence for one departure. And Elias had been counting, unknowingly, faithfully, preparing the ledger. Now the debt had come due. The drawers began to close, one by one, clang, 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 until only one remained. Drawer 18, the last, the one marked Granger, the new Elias, breathing, smiling, stepped into the light. He pulled the drawer open. Inside, the real Elias lay still, pale, eyes wide, mouth open as if caught mid-whisper. His chest did not rise. The lights in the morgue flickered once, then returned to full brightness for the first time in days. The air was clear, the walls silent, and on the desk, the morgue system chimed. Count stabilized, 18, all entries balanced. The new Elias walked to the terminal. He typed slowly, status active, then turned toward the gurney and began arranging the next white sheet. From the corridor outside came footsteps. A nurse. A new body had just arrived from ICU. A cardiac arrest. Unexpected. No ID, no family. The nurse looked in at Elias and hesitated. "You're new," she said. Elias smiled. "Just filling in." The nurse handed over the chart and left. Elias stood alone again in the morgue. He reached for the drawer. The sheet was warm. Something beneath it stirred, just slightly, and the whisper began again. Not in the room, not in the walls, inside him. 1, 2, 3. He smiled and began to count.